episode, I sat down with Jason Shurka. Jason's a really fascinating guy. I came to know him through his YouTube channel, which is very good. He speaks about a dearth of different topics, things that I'm also very interested in. Recently, he was on a very good YouTube channel called Redacted, where they were interviewing him about the recent Khafre pyramid discovery, which I've been very fascinated about. He wrote a book called The Pyramid Code, which I think is very much related to that. So it was a really interesting conversation. We spoke about that, about healing through energy, frequency, vibration, all sorts of topics, spirituality, the kind of spiritual war that's going on, control and one world government, and some really interesting topics. So it was a pleasure to have him on, a pleasure to have him speak. I'd love to have him back on. It was a shorter conversation, so I think we have a lot more to connect about. So hopefully soon we'll do round two. When this is being released, I think myself and my colleague Marav Artsy will be finished with our Portugal retreat, but we have another retreat coming up in Ireland beginning July 1st. It's an amazing opportunity to work with us, to work with plants via the medium of tobacco, trees, to really learn experientially from them, to heal with them. So if you'd like more information about that, you can check out my website at nicotianarustica.org. And always, if you're able to support the podcast, that's a really big help. It's what allows me to keep creating these episodes. Patreon is a really amazing option. It's a website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, to all the people supporting that way, thank you very much for your help. And if you're able to do that, that's a really big help. I really like sites like that because they're built on this idea of reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something from this podcast, that's an amazing way to give back. And if not, always just helping with the algorithm. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it for the intro. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Jason.
Running out from the maze. Running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
Cool, man. So thank you for coming on. I would imagine some of the listeners have heard about you. I imagine some haven't. So I know it's a big question, but maybe just to start off, you can let the audience know a bit more about yourself, who you are, the work you do, and kind of what your journey through life has been to get you to the point you're at now.
Of course. First of all, Jason, my name is also Jason. I want to say thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for making this conversation happen. In terms of who I am, I always find that to be a funny question, because how does anybody really answer that question, right? It's like, who are you? And there's so many different ways to answer it. Is it what you do? Is it who you are? Is it your state of doing? Is it your state of being? So I like answering it on multiple fronts, but on the surface, I do a lot of things. I'm an author. I'm a founder of several different companies and projects, Unified Healing. I'm a representative of this technology right behind me called the Light System. I am the founder of Unified TV. And I can go on and on of the things that I do, but what I think matters the most is why do we do them? And who am I on the state of being? So it really comes down to the inspiration of kind of seeing this world and not being too happy with it, because I think that we could make this world a much, much better place than it currently is. And seeing that possibility firsthand growing up with my amazing family and my father and my mother and my sister, and just the way that you could be living if you chose to take certain actions in a positive way, inspired me to do everything that I'm doing today. So that's what really inspired the books that I wrote. They're all focused on more of the spiritual essence of life, breaking things down into understanding the fundamental laws, understanding how energy works, not what energy is, because it's infinite, you can't limit that, but how it works, because if we can master that, we can master life. My goal in this lifetime is, how do we master our lives to the greatest degree? Not to escape the matrix, but to really master it, to master this game that we call life, and make this life a whole lot more worth living.
Can you speak a bit more about unified healing? I mean, a lot of this podcast is devoted to healing, and it's such a broad topic, and people can come at it from so many different angles. So what does that mean to you? I mean, you also mentioned that aspect of spirituality, which I think will resonate with a lot of the audience. But usually in a lot of our medical systems, the idea of spirituality and healing is not connected. And yet I
Yeah.
think more and more people are coming to realize that a deep place of healing actually comes from spirituality. I mean, I worked with a lot of indigenous people in the Amazon, and they would actually say that at our root, all of our suffering comes from the fact that we've become disconnected. We've forgotten who we are and where we come from. And I think that's really at the root of a lot of spirituality, is that idea of knowing thyself. And yet, often from a healing point of view, we tend to look at things in a much more reductionist way and kind
Yeah.
of put that as something else.
So I'm happy you brought that up because I always speak about the difference between reductionism and holism. And I come from the perspective of holism because reductionism brought us to the point that we're at today with Big Pharma, where they are experts in every pixel and part of the body, but we've forgotten that the body is one whole unit. So when you're an expert in each pixel, but you forgot the picture that all pixels make up, you create things like Accutane that are really good for your acne, but they destroy your liver. Or you create drugs that are really good for some heart issue that you're dealing with, but it may give you cancer. So it's doing something good at the expense of something else. Unified Healing is a project that I started about 3 years ago, intended to basically change that entire paradigm. So in less than 3 years, we've helped open over 500 wellness centers in over 50 countries around the world. And every single one of these wellness centers are basically intended, and they were created from the philosophy of, yeah, we have a broken system today, but if we just try to fight that, it's not really going to do anything. So instead of trying to fight it and destroy it, let's just build a better one. And if we can build a better one, the old one that doesn't work as well will eventually become obsolete. So that's what this network of wellness centers is around the world. And the technology that you see behind me is not just a cool form of art, because people see it and they're like, what is that thing? It's so cool. It's what I would call medicinal art. So it's using exactly what Tesla told us to do. And that is when you think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you understand the secrets of the universe. So when you use light in a specific way, and that's exactly what this is doing, you're just looking at one program. We could change the programs on these screens all day. And you're using different wavelengths to interact with the body to rebalance and reoptimize the organs of the body and also the energy of the body. That's where the spiritual, emotional, mental aspect comes into it. What we do at these centers worldwide, instead of just saying, take this pill and everything's going to be better, but we're just going to say all these side effects real quick before anybody figures out what's actually going to come out of it. We've created something that actually comes from a more holistic perspective as opposed to the reductionistic perspective. So Unified Healing has these technologies all around the world. And essentially in a very, very short summary of what you're looking at here is a combination of color therapy, movement of light in a specific way to help reoptimize the body, and positive words, affirmations, and intentionality that's built into this code. So you can actually, by the press of a button, it would be hard to see on the camera now, but you can actually take what you're looking at on the screen, which just looks like a code, and you can translate it into English. Those are words and affirmations on the screen that you have the ability to enter your own intentionality into. So some people look at that and they're like, what are you talking about? How would something like that actually work? And there are scientific studies done on that by Dr. Masaru Emoto with his water experiment, where he showed that certain positive intentionalities and words have the ability to restructure the molecular formation of water. And being that we're made of over 70% water, when you restructure the water in your body, energy can move in a more coherent way. When energy moves in a more coherent way, you have a flow of energy as opposed to a dis-ease of energetic flow, which always leads to disease. So this is one of the ways that we use energy, frequency, and vibration. If some want to call it spirituality, it's energy that you can't really touch, but it's very real, to help the body reoptimize itself. And that's essentially what Unified Healing and Unified Healing centers all around the world do.
So I think one of the things we share in common is I think a deep interest, fascination, and a deep curiosity about ancient cultures. And it's interesting because there's a pyramid behind you, but
Yeah.
when you go all over the world, you mentioned these three things: energy, frequency, and vibration, and those are key components of ancient civilizations all over the world. Whether it's sound frequencies, vibrational frequencies, you see these very beautiful geometric patterns all over the world in these ancient temples. Even these pyramidal designs, these megalithic structures, you see them more and more all over the world. I mean, there's certain ones that are more well known, the Egyptian Great Pyramids, but all over the Americas, and they just keep finding more all over the place. They think in China now there's a bunch. One of the interesting things, because just before we started, I mentioned I had seen you on a very good YouTube channel called Redacted. Shout out to them. I think they do some amazing work. But one of the interesting things in the last couple of weeks was it really went viral, and it had been reported before, but one of the Great Pyramids, the Khafra Pyramid, using this very interesting technology, which,
SAR,
yeah,
synthetic aperture, um, SAR radar.
radar, yeah. Yeah, and so essentially, from what I understood from that is these Italian scientists are basically pinging, also interestingly, energy, frequency, vibration, like a sonar, to be able to have sound vibrations to map out a 3D model of what they found under the pyramid. And they weren't even originally from, because I listened to an interview with them, which was very good. But they weren't even necessarily looking for anything under the pyramid. They were trying to get a better idea of the pyramid itself, and they mapped it out perfectly, even finding new rooms within the pyramid itself. But what they found under it is something that's amazing, which is something like eight cylindrical structures going something like 645, 48 meters deep, that connect to two something like 80-meter square chambers, and the whole structure is something like 2 kilometers below the earth. That's fascinating. And that, if that proves to be true, I think that really shifts the consciousness of what we view as the technology of the ancient ones. As if the pyramids themselves weren't enough. But I think sometimes we can look at something like the stars and we just call them the stars, and we forget the awe, or the amazement of just the grandness of things. And I think it's a similar thing with the pyramid. Like, just because they're there, we've lost just the amazement of what those things actually are. But I think if this new finding can be proven to be true, that really changes our focus, and that obviously these pyramids were not simply tombs, that they were something else. And, something you spoke about is something I found fascinating for a long time, that even within these pyramids, you have things like pi, the golden ratio, the speed of light, the circumference of the earth. And, even these pyramids are connected to each other around the world to these very precise numbers, which I think is something a lot of people aren't familiar with. But you actually wrote a book on that, or I think part was gifted to you too, called The Pyramid Code. So this is something you have an expertise in. I think it's something that a lot more people are becoming fascinated in. And I know this is a big question, but can you speak a bit about that work? Because I think that's something that, as you said, that this kind of reductionist way of healing is a much more modern way of healing. And when you look at these ancient cultures, they didn't separate things like philosophy, spirituality, even this idea of psyche. It doesn't mean the mind; it means the soul. And I think we've really lost that. So could you speak a bit more about? Because I really enjoyed that interview you did with Redacted, and I think you have a lot of really interesting things to say about that.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. So I think it's been obvious for quite some time that the pyramids are not just tombs, but the perspective that we have today, I think, is done by design. So let's go through that for a second. Then we could speak about the pyramid code and certain things that the documents say, which really also inspired this design behind me because of the power, not just of, it looks nice, but the power of the shape itself. When you have certain geometric formations, energy moves in a different way through those formations, just like with water in the body. When you have those geometric molecular structures, energy can move better, you have health. When you have distorted structures or structures that have energy that gets stuck, like a square, for example, a square or a 90-degree angle just won't work. If you're taking water and putting it through a pipe that has a 90-degree angle, you're destroying the structure of that water when it's moving through that pipe. So you need things to be a lot more kind of in flow and in coherence if you want things to work the right way when it comes to the healing side of everything. But the pyramids, we've been taught, for a very, very long time that they're just these tombs, and they've built them with, some hammers and sledges and a lot of people moving something. And that's beautiful and great, but it doesn't explain a lot of the questions that we have with a lot of the findings that we're finding. If they were just tombs, why are they putting pi into these structures? Why are they building certain mathematical constants like the golden ratio? Why are they placing it on latitude lines that are perfectly in alignment with the speed of light? And what I mean by that is the Great Pyramid is on, in terms of degrees north on latitude, 29.9792458 degrees north. And when you look at the speed of light, it's 299,792,458 meters per second. Now, that cannot be a coincidence, all the way to like the seventh, decimal after the zero, the seventh digit after the zero. That's a crazy thing to be able to build into the pyramids. And yet we're being told that they didn't really know much back then. They were pretty primitive. They had these pharaohs and kings, and they wanted to build something nice for them. But we're seeing that it's a whole lot deeper than that, and quite literally deeper than that because of what we're finding underneath the pyramids. So like you said, you have these 8 cylinder structures, 648 meters in length, going underneath the ground with what they see as like either coils or staircases under each one, all connected by these 80 by 80 by 80 cubic meter cubes or basements, or perhaps they're energy storage containers, because when you're creating energy, you need a place to store that energy. It's not enough just to create it. You need a place to store it in a stable way so you can then use it later on. That's how energy works. So we're seeing all of these things from 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, some say it's much longer than that, be built in a way that we can barely understand today, and yet we call them primitive. I think we are the ones that are primitive, and we have a lot to learn in terms of what these structures are actually created for. Now, when I was given the Pyramid Code document, I was given the document back in 2020. And when I was given it, it was given to me by somebody that wants to remain anonymous. He doesn't like being in the spotlight or limelight in any way, but he wanted that information to come out. And when I saw it and given the opportunity to share it, I said, you know what? I'll take the bullet for this one. A lot of people are going to think I'm crazy, but the truth always prevails. So let's bring it out. And it's a 44-page document in English, 31 pages in Hebrew. And I say in Hebrew because it was originally written in the Hebrew language and translated into English. And the things that are spoken about there, in some cases, are really crazy to most people when they read them. But time and time again, we're seeing things come to fruition and the truth prevailing. For example, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but in the document, and this was shared 5 years ago, so anybody can see that because it was shared on the date of the timestamp when it was put out. 5 years before this information came out, this document literally says that beyond all the things that the pyramids were used for and why the pharaohs were actually buried, put in there as tombs, because they are buried in there with their bodies for a specific purpose, it specifically says that there are certain chambers and structures underneath the pyramid that nobody has found yet. And there are, and I quote, basements underneath, deep underground, where certain things are stored there for purposes of being charged through the energy of the sun. Now, when we look at what is being found by these researchers and scientists, those two guys that you spoke about, we're seeing just that. You're seeing a structure that can harness energy with coils and cylinders going underground, where all of those connect to 2 basements or 2 cubic structures that nobody has technically gotten there yet. But if the Pyramid Code is right and that document is right, and they let us go down there, because that's a very big point to get to as well, you should be finding certain artifacts and technologies that are down there for the purposes of being charged through the energy being generated by these structures, in this case, the pyramid. So there are a lot of things that we know, but there are more things that we don't know. And the more that we find out, the more questions that we have. That's the beauty of these structures, that we think we know something and then we find something more and it raises 1,000 other questions. What we can be certain of without all the details is they knew certain things back then that we don't know today. And the common theme that we see back then, and forget 3,000 years ago, go 200, 300, 400 years ago, we saw people from a more holistic perspective. I'm not just talking about medicine. I'm talking about different disciplines connecting to each other. So we call it a polymath. A polymath is somebody that is good at many different things, knows a lot about a lot. And they're able to connect these so-called gaps, and there are no gaps, they're just the illusions of gaps, between philosophy and psychology and biology and chemistry and spirituality and science and so on and so forth. We had that back then. Today, our system, and I think this is by design, our system is being built in a way where people are specialists in one thing. And it's great to be a specialist in one thing or one pixel on the screen. But if you don't know how your pixel connects to all other pixels, then your specialty is really not worth that much, because then we end up in the world that we're in today, which is a reductionistic one. So you have all these experts in specific fields, but nobody knows how to talk to each other and bridge the gaps. That leads to disease across the board.
So what do you think the pyramids were built for? Do you have any sense? I mean, there's a lot of different theories, from obviously the more mainstream archaeological, that they were tombs, to energy sources, towards places to have initiations, to raise your consciousness, literally to be able to travel the stars, which is a very common theme that you find in indigenous cultures all over the world.
Yeah.
But just from your own research and understanding, has that led you in any particular direction?
If you go according to the Pyramid Code, which is a document I resonate with because it's been right about so many other things, there's some things that were in there in the beginning that were hard for me to accept, which I'll explain in a second. But once I started seeing more and more and more things coming true, and it was really accurate, it was easier for me to accept the other things. So, number one, free energy technology generators. Now, people say, there's no such thing as free energy. You can't tap into it because there's always going to be a cost or an expense to be able to do it. I don't buy that. I think that's nonsense. And the reason why I think that's nonsense, beyond the document itself of what it explains of how it is possible, is the very fact that anybody that's come out with what they call free energy technology was destroyed, killed, or somehow committed suicide. And sometimes they commit suicide with 2 bullets in their head, which is not somebody committing suicide. So we see that people are able to succeed in doing this, and every time there's somebody, something, or a group of people taking them down. And again, I believe that that's by design. So one of the main things is a form of energy generation, free energy technology, being able to tap in to the infinite energy. And we know it is infinite because energy can't be created or destroyed. That's the first law of thermodynamics and science. The law of conservation of energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. Beyond that, we see the pyramids and certain chambers in there built in weird ways. Like you have one of the rooms that are built in like this very, very narrow sort of structure that keeps getting more and more and more narrow as you go up. Why would somebody do that? It doesn't make any sense. It's not something that makes sense for having people in there. There's a reason for it. Because when you make certain sounds in there, it creates certain frequencies to help the body heal itself. So beyond just being free energy technology and technologies that can generate energy, it's also a form of technology that can generate specific frequencies to help the body heal itself and to help expand consciousness, like you said. The crazy one that was hard for me to accept, and I'm sure some people may hear it and say, Jason, you're crazy, until this is proven to be the fact, is exactly what you said, using them as sort of vessels to travel, meaning ships, spaceships, literally. Now people look and they say that's not possible. It's just made of rocks. How can rocks ever move? How are you able to do something like that? And that just shows where our kind of awareness is at and how much room we have to grow. Because a rock is just as alive as me and you. It's just alive in a different way. You see, the way that we determine life, if you go to science today, there's 5 different criteria to determine if something is alive. And I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but one of them is if it can replicate itself. Now, what about energy? What about the fact that there is a plus and a minus that makes up the formation of a stone, just like there is a plus and a minus that makes up the formation of the human body. It's the same thing when you go to the basis of it all. Now, our plus and minus is called a man and a woman. But when you look at masculine and feminine energies and you bring those together, you have creation. It doesn't just need to be in the form of a gender of a man or a woman. It needs to be in the energy of masculine and feminine. And everything in life that is in existence, which everything that is created on those two polarities in terms of new creation. A rock is no different. A pyramid is no different. And they use specific rocks to conduct electricity in a specific way when they created those things. So the really far out part of that is the fact that, yeah, they probably are, and they probably do have the ability to travel and move. Now, do we understand that today? No. Do I understand that 100% today? No. Does it make sense in terms of being able to connect the dots and understand that energy is everything, and if you build something in a certain way, you could do some incredible things? Yes. And that's where I take my leap of saying, we may not understand its mechanism today, but we understand it in philosophy, and eventually it's going to be proven once again like it was in the past.
I don't know if you followed John Anthony West. He was a well-known Egyptologist, kind of amateur Egyptologist, I think in the best way of that word. But I think it was in Abydos where they have a list of kings. You know, that's one of the interesting things too, is that the pyramids never themselves say there are any tombs. There's no hieroglyphs that would allude to that. But when you go to some of these other sacred sites, like I believe it's Abydos, that they have a list of kings which dates back to, if you trace it back, something like over 30,000 years ago. And, you know, as you were speaking about, like, there's this amazing precision to the pyramids. And I mean, I think things that are far beyond our comprehension. But, you know, even when you look at the astrological significance of the pyramids, like the alignment to Orion's belt or the rising of the Sphinx to Leo, they're ever so slightly off. And it's just kind of the mainstream view is that, well, they just didn't have that much accuracy, but the accuracy of the pyramids was precise. So if you do trace that back using the precessional cycle to the time where they would have been aligned, it either goes back 12,000 years, or if you take it a precessional cycle back, which John Anthony West said, something like 36,000 years ago, which would line up to the Abydos Kings list. Do you have any thoughts or anything on kind of like the timeline of these? Because that's again, that's such a shift of our worldview from, you know, whenever they were built 2,000 some years ago to even considering 12,000 years ago, or even more 36,000 years ago. And always one of the kind of counters to that claim was just simply, well, it wasn't possible because there was no civilization around back then. But with the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, that really changes that, because that is carbon dated now to about 12,000 years ago, at least 8,000 years ago. So way pushing the timeline way back already. So it's not so hard to imagine 12,000 years ago. Now, for sure, 36,000 years ago is a leap from that worldview. But do you have any thoughts yourself from your own kind of research and feeling and findings on these things?
Yeah, number one, I think the only reason why we think 30,000 years, 30 or 36,000 years is so long is because we live an average of like 80. 36,000 years is not long. That's not a long time ago. You know, it's all in a ratio. You know, it's all relative to where you're at and what we think a long time is. 80 years is a blip that's irrelevant. 1,000 years is also kind of irrelevant. You're talking about existence being around since forever, essentially, if energy can't be created or destroyed. And even when they say, you know, the sun is 5 billion years old and the earth is very, very old, and everybody has, you know, different sort of timelines on that. But
interestingly, just sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you saw, but the kind of consensus now is the Earth is twice as old as was previously thought. So I think before it was 7, and now they've already upped it to like 13 billion years old.
Yeah, and again, we'll never actually know that 100%, because we can only map that out based on something that's linear. For example, and nothing's linear, everything's dynamic. We don't know what we don't know. So it's great in theory. But, let's take the pyramids, for example, with their locations being off a little bit. On one hand, it is a very good point to say, the Earth's axis wobbles a little bit. All of that changes. So the last time that it was this way was that long ago. But that's assuming that everything was constant on Earth itself. And nothing was constant on Earth itself for a very, very long time. Look at the idea of Pangea, where it used to all be one landmass and now it moved. Well, that would change everything too, right? Whenever that would have happened, if they built something in alignment with some sort of star or cosmology or whatever it may be, well, once Pangea happens, all of that changes. So that's already, once the breakup of that landmass happens, all of that changes. So my point is even if there were certain earthquakes over the past 2,000 years that moved the landmass just by a little bit, that could have changed that too. So that would destroy the whole theory of, 36,000 years ago was the last time it was in alignment with this, so it must have been then. Because we're not accounting for the fact of certain masses moving due to situations that we just may not be aware of. So the answer is, I don't know, but nobody does. And if we want to go on that, there are certain things that are worth researching, and there are certain things that we're never going to know. So let's focus on what we could know in order to advance ourselves. Now, in terms of timelines, whether they were built 36,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, it doesn't really matter, because it still changes our history. We do know, if you look at life with dinosaurs and carbon dating, there was life here for a very long time. Now, again, there are certain things worth going deeper into, but here's my problem with where we're at as a human collective. We need so much proof for things that are obvious that it actually makes us move forward a whole lot slower. For example, if I tell you, an apple is good for this part of your body because the green apple actually has a certain frequency to it that will rebalance your heart and your lungs. And we know that because when you understand the optimal frequency of your heart and your lungs, and you understand that that frequency, when translated into a wavelength, is what we perceive as the color green, it's no wonder why green apples will actually re-optimize certain parts of your body over others. Then you would have most people say, prove it. Well, I just did. But we live in a world where we don't understand the laws of energy, frequency, and vibration. We don't understand the fundamentals of everything. So we need proof for something that was already proven in a different way, but our awareness isn't there to understand it. The reason why I share that is because there's so many things that people are asking for proof for while we already have it. And the longer we waste our time on things that are not really relevant, like we have proof that there has been life here for a very, very long time. And just by logic, if you just use logic, life has no opposite. People say, well, what do you mean? Death is the opposite. No, it's not. Because life cannot end, just like life cannot start. Because life is made up of energy. And energy has no beginning and no end. Now somebody will then look at me and say, prove it. Well, we already did. It's called the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That proves everything that people still need proof for. So my point over here is, if we start understanding the fundamentals of life, we'll get a whole lot further, a whole lot quicker. Stop wasting our times on things that have already been proven and start understanding, okay, forget when it was built. How did they do it? Could have been built 1,000,000 years ago. It doesn't matter. How did they do it? What does this have to teach us? The reason why people are so stuck on when it was built was because we're still focused on the indoctrination that's been imposed upon us on our own history books. And if it's not obvious, look at the people that write our history books. Look at the people that fund our so-called history and the writing of it. Look at where we're at today. And again, not to get into theories and conspiracies and all that. Let's focus on fact. There are certain people that have a very big control over this planet today. And those are the people, without naming names, that run the energy sectors, that run the biggest corporations in the world, that basically run all the governments, because the governments have to answer to them because we're in a corporatocracy now and not what it should have been to begin with. When we kind of go back and see, how does all of this align and what do we get from all of it? we understand that, and this is not a theory, this is just fact in terms of what we're seeing in the world. We understand that there are certain people, very powerful people in power today. And I'm not talking about the Elon Musks of the world, because the people that I'm talking about make Elon Musk look homeless. They have a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of control because they run it all. Now, take free energy. These are the same people that are stopping people like Nikola Tesla, that are stopping people from coming out with free energy technology, because these are the same people that monetize the use of the energy that you use that's free. The fact that we have to pay and they meter our use of something that's free shows how corrupt this system is. Now, those same people are writing our history books. They're writing our educational curriculum, specifically in medical school. And ironically enough, they're also the same people that are pushing you the drugs that doctors are pushing to their patients. It's a beautiful system based on a corrupted consciousness. It's a perfect business model, but it keeps people sick. And if somebody like me or you were to say, let's go down underneath the pyramids and learn what these pyramids actually have to teach us and show us that our history is not exactly what has been taught to us in school, but it's something a whole lot more expansive, I don't think they're going to let that happen so easily, because that is a threat to the existence of the powers that be today. Ultimately, what we need to do is first acknowledge there are certain people that have negative agendas in this world. And that's not something we have to complain about. It's something we need to be aware about so we can overcome it. Remember, like I said, with unified healing, we didn't build it to destroy the past system. We built it to build a better one so the past one becomes obsolete. This is a spiritual war that we're experiencing right now. We could do all the research we want. We could do all the expeditions we want. We could do anything that we want. At the end of the day, all the proof is there already. The question is, are we ready as the human collective to accept it? Are we ready to see it? Are we ready to expand beyond the boundaries that we have allowed to be imposed upon us in our own consciousness? And if the answer to that question is yes from enough people, this entire world will change. And we will accept a completely new history that's much more empowering than what we have today.
It's interesting because so many cultures around the world, we often speak kind of this idea of cosmovisions, that every group of people has a certain cosmovision, and that's literally how they see the world. And also, as you said, it stems from history, it stems from their spirituality, it stems from how they view themselves. And your cosmovision literally does create your reality. It's interesting because even speaking about the pyramids, like a lot in the West, we trace our roots back to the Greek civilization. But, even you look at these guys, that's where that idea of liberal art education came from, was these guys who were polymaths. Like they didn't specialize in something per se. Even like Pythagoras, to get into a school, allegedly you had to fast from speaking for 2 years, and then only then were you given the ability to come in, and you had to study math and science and alchemy and cosmology and all of these things. And even these things that we take to be the base, like the Pythagorean theorem, according to him, he learned everything from the Egyptians, and the Egyptians who had these ancient systems. And the Egyptians also said that they had these storehouses of this ancient knowledge. They would laugh at Solon, for example, when he said, where there was this ancient civilization, and he said, well, you all are so silly. You've forgotten it. You've forgotten where you came from. And, even it's interesting because that's where that idea of Atlantis comes from, was this ancient civilization. But because of their hubris, because of their own self-infatuation, they fell. And I think it's a really interesting thing. Even where I've been living in Peru, they have these stories of the Andes. It's more the Spanish way of saying it. It's actually the Antes. And according to them, it was a very old civilization. And then you also had the Atla civilization, which even in Aztec, the Nuatla language, it means, it's the language they spoke, but Atla means of the water. And so you had the Atla and the Antes. So even there, you had these stories of Atlantis. But I think it's really interesting what you're saying, that this kind of this idea of cosmovision, of where things come from, and also this idea that the fall of old civilizations could have been from their own hubris. And
I
so,
love that you bring up Atlantis because there's a huge lesson to learn there. And in very simple terms, when your technological development surpasses your spiritual development, that's a very big problem. If your spiritual development cannot keep up with your technological development, you end up using the technology in an irresponsible way. Now, look where we're at now. We're in the same exact space in our world today, right now, at this point in time. Our technology is rapidly developing, and our spirituality is not keeping up to par on the collective level. So now we're using technology in ways that's actually detrimental to the body. Eventually, if we don't fix that, we self-destruct. That's Atlantis happening all over again.
so I think something interesting you're bringing up is this idea of design. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Like we look back at the past and we know that there was empires, there were kings that wanted to control, but we look at our time and somehow we think we've moved away from that. But then you have these things that came up like COVID, which, for example, this channel was censored for speaking things that were true at the time and have since been shown to be true. But something like COVID, I think you'd have to be hard pressed to look at that and say there isn't some force that's supranational that's controlling it, considering that almost every country went around with the same logic, the same propaganda, the same rules, the same regulations, which is quite crazy because how would that be if every nation was independent, doing their own research, coming up with their own choice? So I think there are more people waking up to that. And that was even a big part of my own journey, was also understanding, as you said, holistic health and how those things have been compromised. I think it's a stretch for a lot of people because it really shatters their worldview. It shatters their cosmovision to think that there are malevolent forces in the world. And yet you also said something which I think is very prescient and very, very true, which is that we are in a type of spiritual battle. I don't know that we've ever not been in one, but again, it's a certain language that we don't speak about now, that there are forces of good and evil at work. Most people tend to always think that they're on the side of good without necessarily knowing that, as has been said, the road to hell can be paved with good intentions. I know it's a big subject, but you've mentioned it a few times, this idea that a lot of these structures are there by design. What do you mean by that?
What structures are we talking about?
Well, you said like a lot of the things like the medical industry or the mainstream view of Egypt and all of these things they're there by design, meaning like these things aren't necessarily like all these pieces that ultimately do lead to a form of control, of manipulation, of a certain cosmovision, that they're not necessarily just random pieces that all happen to be kind of
Yeah.
in that way, but that there can be something that is by design shaping our cosmovision to look at the world in a certain way.
Beautiful. So I'll answer that question. Before I do, I want to, and we'll come right back to this. I want to bring up something that you just mentioned of it's hard for people to accept certain things because it shatters their reality. So I want to give a real life example from a couple decades ago, having to do with, I believe it was the Ford Pinto, if I'm not mistaken, the car, and how they went about what happened with that thing, with that car. So true story, anybody can look this up. A lot of people watching may remember this. So the Pinto, the car, was actually going through this idea of being recalled. The reason why was because it had a faulty gas tank and it would explode randomly on people. So when I learned how they go about deciding to recall it or not, even though they know there's a problem, was what really opened my eyes to say, whoa, if it's happening there, it's happening everywhere. And this is a public case that may help the people that are having realities shattered to understand what's actually going on, although it's hard to accept. So with the Pinto, all these gas tanks, all these cars were essentially exploding. People were dying, and they had to make a decision. When they made the decision on choosing to recall it or not, they have, I believe they're called actuaries, if I'm not mistaken, and they have a formula. There's two things going on at the same time. The first side of the formula is an equation asking the following. How many cars did we sell? What percent of those cars are going to blow up? How many people are going to be in those cars on average? And what's the average value of the average person sitting in that car if we were to settle in court? And let's say 100 people are going to die and it's going to cost us $100 million. Well, now the second part of the equation is how much is it going to cost to recall the car? If it's going to cost $120 million to recall the car, we're not going to recall it. We're going to let the 100 people die because that's only going to cost us $100 million. That's the sick world that we're living in right now. It's about money. It's about power. It's about your stock price. And they'll let people die so long as we make a little bit more money and our investors are happy. Now, that's on a very, very low level. But keep in mind, if it happens in the car industry, it's happening in the medical industry. It's happening in every industry across the board because that shows you a reflection of our consciousness of where we are currently at. So I just wanted to share that to give a real life example. But to answer your question, for everybody watching this, I'll ask everybody, maybe it's going to be hard to do, but put yourself in the shoes of an individual or a small group of individuals that wants to control 8 billion people. How does 100 or 200 people control 8 billion people? And you can't do it physically because 8 billion people outnumber you. There's nothing you can do. So you need to do it in such a way that's not physical, but rather mental, emotionally, psychologically, and in some cases, spiritually. Although mental, emotional, psychologically, in my book is spiritually, it's the same thing. But I'm giving different terminology to be able to, have people understand it in a different way and connect to it in a different way. So in short, if you're a small group of people trying to control billions, you need the billions to control themselves. How do you get them to control themselves? Well, you need them to believe certain things. How do you get them to believe certain things? You need to create a system that they basically trust and outsource their power to because the expert said so. So the experts would be the scientists, the doctors, the professors. You need them to tell the common person because in the system that was created, the common person is so busy with so many jobs to be able to pay their debts, they don't have time to go and research that themselves. So now the system has been created in a way where the common person is saying, okay, I just need to trust this guy that went to school for 10 years because he knows better than me because I don't have time to look into that. Now, if you go a step up that ladder, it's not always the guy that went to school for 10 years is a bad guy. You have to look at who is teaching the guy that went to school for 10 years. Now you look at things like, by name, the Rockefeller Foundation. They literally control the education system when it comes to medical schools all around the United States and in some cases all around the world. They created the curriculum of what's taught and how it's taught in these medical schools. So now we're focused on the medical system in this example. So now you have Joe Schmo paying $500,000 in 10 years to go to medical school, being taught something that he accepts as a truth. He then is considered the expert that shares it with his patient. And the patient doesn't have time because the powers that be also created us in such a way where we're essentially slaves. Slavery was never abolished. It was just transformed into a different way. And slavery is you go to school, you're taught to be an employee. You're taught to listen and follow orders. You're taught to not question this or this because the expert said so. And you're just going to follow suit, work 9 to 5, have a loan that you have to pay off. And even if you see that there's something wrong in the system, you won't be able to afford the opportunity to speak about it. Because if you speak about it, your job will be in jeopardy. And if your job is in jeopardy, your income's in jeopardy. And if your income's in jeopardy, you can't put food on the table for your family. So you're going to shut your mouth because you've been put in a situation where even if you know that there's something wrong, you got to protect your family and you're not going to say anything. So big picture, that also goes to history. We're living in a world today where we need to believe that this technology is the best, and this medicine is the best, and this is the best way of going about it. What do you think happens if we find out that 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, they had other ways of going about healing the body that didn't have to do with all of these $1 million treatments that insurance companies pay that we basically bail out through our tax money all the time? What if we found out that there were free ways of going about healing ourselves? Well, then the powers that I just spoke about would have no power anymore. So they need to keep us in a situation where we believe that the only way to move forward is their way. And it's not. So that's why people like me are deleted on Instagram many times, because we're a threat to those powers that be. That's why people like, not just me, but a lot of the people that speak about these things, they're sought after, they're gone after, they're taken down one way or another. Because when you share that truth, you are poking a $1 trillion empire that wants nothing to do with you speaking about that. And they're going to stop you. So when it comes to Egypt, the reason why I said if they'll even let us go down there is because even if they do, I don't believe they're going to share what's found until they have no other choice, because it becomes obvious. Because what will be found will revolutionize our technology industries today, our energy sectors today. And it revolutionizes it in a way that's very good for us, we the people, but it's very bad for the people that control the people. And that's where that system is being designed. And it's more than just an octopus with 8 arms. It's extremely complex with a finger in absolutely everything. The reason why we don't know all of these people directly, and we can name some of them like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all of them, is because they don't operate under their names. They operate under trusts. They operate under foundations. They operate under corporations. They operate under front people that are doing it for them. You're talking about very, very powerful people that know how to mask themselves and stay behind the scenes while controlling the entire situation.
It's interesting. I think you have coming up some interviews with James O'Keefe, who's done some amazing work. I mean, I think he's a true investigative journalist, again, in the true sense. And I think I read somewhere you were also speaking about RFK and Junior, and I think that's a really interesting example because, you know, he was or is a Democrat from one of the most prestigious families in American history, and really shares a lot of views of the Democratic Party. And yet, once he started to question the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, the propaganda that came out against him was just phenomenal. And again, this is what I mean, like when the road to hell is paved with good intentions, is, you know, there's so many people who, in kind of a spiritual sense, really view him as like a demon, someone who's not a good person, simply for questioning the health of America, the health of children. Like, this should be something that everyone is for. Like, whatever you view, like, you would want real research to come out. You would want, you know, for example, probably a lot of people know, but vaccines are like one of the few things, and it's not to say whether they're good or bad per se, but vaccines are the only thing that I'm aware of where even in their own trials, they're not tested against a placebo being a sugar pill. They're tested, the placebo is another vaccine, usually the 5 or 6 shot vaccine. So the only qualification that they need to be approved is, are they less harmful? Is one vaccine less harmful than a combination of 5 or 6 vaccines? I mean, that's crazy. That's literally crazy. And yet someone who's speaking out about that is really demonized. You know, I think also because of his relationship to Trump, and there's been so much propaganda against him. But I think these things, like, there are people who are beginning to see these things, and yet at the same time, you see this tremendous force that's operating to suppress that. I mean, much like earlier we were speaking about COVID. I mean, you know, as you said, people did. They lost their jobs. They couldn't work. I mean, you had laws. You had a president of the U.S. saying this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Like, fall in line, do what you need to, or you won't be able to feed your family. So I think more people are seeing that, and yet at the same time, there seems to be maybe a greater divide than ever of people who are really not necessarily willing to. Again, in the example of RFK, like, wouldn't you just want to support science? Like, have science come out? Are these things good or are they bad?
It's even beyond that. Imagine I told you, I have a product, you have to take it, but if you get hurt, you can't sue me. That's what they did in 1986. They passed an act giving all of those companies, putting out all those injections, immunity. That's insane. There's no such thing in the world other than that specific industry in the United States specifically that says you need to take this thing or you can't go to school, you can't work, you can't travel. You need to take this thing, but if you don't, you can't do anything. And if you do and something happens to you, you can't sue us. That's criminal.
So where do you think that's going? I mean, there's a lot of talk of obviously like the vaccine passport, that it's kind of a gateway into, because, ultimately, if you don't have control over your body, what do you have control over in terms of regulating where you can move, whether you can work, into this kind of social credit system? One world governments, often it's kind of colloquially referred to this global agenda, but things are very much and very quickly moving in that direction. And again, it usually comes in the guise of something very good, like, wouldn't you want to do that? Isn't it good that the world is getting smaller? Isn't it good that we can all agree on the same things, that you can have a gasoline car, that you have to have carbon credits? Like, it's all in the name of a supposed good. And yet, I think it's quite rare that people can see things from the other side in that way, that maybe these things aren't necessarily all for the good of humans.
We already have a one world government. It's called the United Nations and the World Health Organization. Again, under different names. That's how these people operate. It looks like we have separate ones because you have different countries, but they're all working together. So that's called a one world government. Now, just to be very clear, I am not against a one world government in theory. I'm against it when you have a cancer in the system and then you're allowing it to spread. But if you want to go to like spirituality and a utopian society, without all those problems and corruption, we really should be living as one. We really should be having a collective unit all together, operating together. The idea of borders, again, in a utopian society, today you need it. But in a society where we don't have all this corruption and problems, you really shouldn't have borders. You shouldn't have different passports for different things. We're nowhere near that in terms of going to a good place with it. My problem today with the one world government is the people at the top today are very corrupt. So when you give them even more control over an entire domain, let alone, not just a country, but an entire planet, it's going to lead to much, much, much greater issues. We're also forgetting that government is supposed to be public servants, not public controllers. Public servants mean you are supposed to serve me as my governor or my president. You're not here to control me. I'm here to tell you what I want, and you're here to follow that. But that's no longer what happens. That's not a problem with government. That's a problem with human consciousness. And today it's expressed through government, and tomorrow it's going to be expressed through something else. To fix this issue, we need to change ourselves on the level of our own being. If we can change that, we're going to see the expression of that be a whole lot different. Now, I know I'm talking a lot of big picture stuff, and it's not going to happen anytime soon, but it doesn't change that fact. We're moving towards that direction very fast, but we're also moving away from that direction at the same time, because the faster we move towards it, the more people wake up. So it's this interesting balance that we're seeing. Ultimately, and this is just how I see the world, based on science as well, everything is connected to everything else. You cannot isolate something from anything else. We can have the illusion of isolating something from something else, but everything in existence is connected to everything in existence, whether we understand it or not. And if everything is one, now going to the philosophical side of things, I don't believe oneness will ever do anything to hurt itself, just like I'm not going to take a hammer and break my own leg because I am one body, and I'm not going to do something to hurt myself. Doesn't make sense. Now, because we believe in this illusion of division, where I am separate from you, we have war, we have crime, we have corruption, we have murder, we have all these things that are happening because we are disconnected from the very fact that we are all connected. Now, when it comes to what I'm talking about, if oneness will never do anything to hurt itself, I believe that ultimately everything that's happening in our world today is happening for us, not to us. Now, people are looking and saying, how can you say such a thing? How can you say that child sex trafficking is happening for us and not to us? Well, it's happening for us because there is a lesson in every single one of those things that we can choose to wake up to and choose to stop. And when you're dealt with adversity, you get a whole lot stronger when you face it head on. Now, over the past few years, we've realized how numb we've been for such a long time. Because the whole issue with these injections that you're talking about didn't start in 2020. Up until 2020, a child by the age of 18 still needed to get 72 of them with aluminum and with all these preservatives in them that were creating a lot of issues. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse until in 2020, it got even worse. And guess what? It happened for us. Because now a lot of people are starting to question the past that we never questioned. That is a way that, call it God, call it the universe, call it source, is trying to wake us up. And the best analogy I can give to explain that, to make it clear, is let's say me and you are in a room. You are asleep. There's a fire in the house. I'm trying to wake you up and I'm a part of you. My best interest is to help you wake up because we're connected. Because if you die, I die. So I'm going to tap you and say, Jason, wake up. You're not going to wake. You didn't wake up. Now I'm going to start shaking you. You're not waking up. Now I'm going to smack you. You didn't wake up. I'm going to keep getting louder and more aggressive until you wake up. And by the end of it, I may have punched you in the face and you may have a black eye and you may look at me saying, Jason, why did you punch me in the face? You hurt me. But that's only because you were unaware that there was a fire in the house that was going to kill you. My job as me being connected to you was to wake you up. And if you're not waking up, I'm going to get louder, more aggressive, and stronger until you wake up. If you are unaware of the fire, you're going to think I'm the enemy, when really I was there to help save you. And that's what we're living in right now. We're getting punched in the face. We're getting knocked out. We're getting hurt. We don't understand why is this happening to us. We're not aware of the fire that is burning on this planet that is going to take over if we don't wake up. The punches in the face are the blessings being given to us by God. And the sooner we wake up, the sooner the agenda that you just spoke about will stop.
So where do you see things going? I mean, we were kind of talking about this spiritual battle of light and dark. I mean, even you had an interesting interview speaking about angels and demons. And, you know, again, even in this idea of a utopian society, I mean, when you do look at ancient cultures, they often speak of this idea that there have been enlightened times, there have been times that were very dark, and that time does seem to be cyclical like that. And they can be very long periods as well. But they often speak about those cycles, meaning up and down, left and right, good and bad. And even, you know, from a more like Christian point of view, probably a religion that more people are familiar with. I mean, even when you look at like Catholic churches or Russian Orthodox churches, I mean, there's these epic battles between light and dark, between seraphims and querubins and the archangels and demons and entities. And you know, but again, I think it's something that we've gotten away from. You know, interestingly, on the one hand, we've gotten away from religion, and at the same time, it seems like there's also a renaissance of religion, because I think people are longing for something in the realm of spirit, that's where they're looking for. Do you have any sense of where the world is going? Because we do seem to be at an interesting crossroads, with the world becoming so small, with this kind of one world government happening, with people having access to information, with technology increasing so much. You know, there's all these ideas that we can continue to kind of evolve at this exponential rate, but also, as you said, which I think is very important, like, we're still human beings. We still need fresh air. We still need water. We still need touch. And if we don't have those things, we do get disease. And I think we're also seeing, you know, literally disease increasing at an exponential rate as well.
I believe, this is just my opinion, that there's going to be a split. There's already a split. And I think, and I don't know how many people, but I think one side of that is going to go to a lot more of the natural side of things and preserving our things that aren't artificial, our things that are real. And you're going to have another side of the split that's going to keep developing in an irresponsible way when it comes to technology without the spirit meeting that. And eventually that split will become one, because just like in Atlantis, it was wiped out. Meaning when you have that split, one will remain and one will wipe itself out. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a consequence of actions. It's not about, there is no punishment in this world that we're talking about. It's just If I jump off a building, I'm going to hit the floor and die. If I do this, this is going to happen. Take judgment out of it. Just this and that, right? It's just what is. So I think we're already starting to see that split without going into the whole metaphysical side of it. But I do feel that we're starting to see that split. And the quicker we start seeing, the brain chips and the Neuralinks and all that coming into people's brains, the quicker that split is going to happen. And I do believe that at some point, you're going to see half of that split wipe themselves out as a result of their own actions, and the other half remain because they stayed in alignment with spirituality increasing with technological development. And again, it's not about a good thing or a bad thing. I'm calling it just kind of what it is, right? Those who go in the way of staying in coherency and compatibility with the natural world doesn't mean that, we need to turn into cavemen. It means we need to start building technology in ways that are compatible with the body. They will definitely survive. They will definitely stay here. And it's like almost survival of the fittest, only not just in the physical sense. Now it's the spiritual sense. Survival of the fittest, survival of the ones that are more in alignment with and more compatible with what you need to survive. And that's why I'm not calling it a punishment. It's literally, if I just keep putting you in a microwave over and over again, you're going to die. And if I take you away from that and start creating more coherent technologies and start moving forward in a more responsible way, not only you're going to live, but you're going to thrive. And I think that's the next step of evolution that we're going to see. With that split, eventually erasing the divide and turning into one. Because only one will be able to survive factually.
So kind of coming full circle back to this idea of energy, frequency, sound, it's very interesting because in kind of ancient cultures all over the world, you have these healing systems which are based on those. I spent a lot of time in the Amazon, and there's with certain plants, certain energies are evoked. There's healing chants, healing sounds through vibration, through frequency. You look at traditions like in West Africa of working with things like iboga. There's this intricate music and vibration and frequency that puts you in a very particular state, which, they call it medicine. And it's very interesting because even in most of these cosmovisions, they often say that these sacred plants came from the stars because, again, humans were suffering. And so there was this technology that was being worked with. And as you said, it seems like as the cancer begins to spread, like the cure is also within that cancer. And so it is going back to these things that we seem to be coming back to and yet never left us. Sound, vibration, energy, those things were never not here with us, but we somehow forgot about them. With the work you're doing, how do you see people beginning to integrate these things more into their lives to find more of that balance, to not be in a state of dis-ease, but to be in a state of ease? Because as you said, like most people don't want to go back to being a caveman. Even if they idealize it, if they were actually living like that, they wouldn't be very happy. Like people do still want to order from Amazon and talk like we are in our computer. But how do you think people can begin to integrate more of these ancient practices, which really do promote health and well-being into their lives?
Well, on the simple and really, really accessible side of all of it, breathe more. Spend more time in the sun, like really simple things that we've forgotten. Breathe more. Bring more oxygen into your system and your blood. Eat food that doesn't come out of a bag. And I'm not saying don't have a phone, right? I'm always on the computer and the phone. We're working. We're in the world that we're in today. That's okay. But counterbalance that with two approaches. The real natural approach is like breathing, drinking clean water, eating clean food, thinking clean thoughts, surrounding yourself with good people. That will take you so far, just that alone. And for people like me, because I'm very busy during the day and I don't always remember. I always have time. You have time for whatever you want to make time for. But I tell myself I don't have time because I'm so in this tunnel vision of I have a mission, I'm going to get this done. So that's where other aspects of technologies like this one comes in. That's the purpose of those unified healing centers. It's to be able to create a healthy environment for your body to synchronize with in an effortless way. So, for example, I could take this cup of water and I could bless it all the time, which I do my best to do because that's very, very important because the blessing will change the structure of the water scientifically. That's based on Dr. Masaru Emoto's water experiment and his scientific studies. Now, to take that to the next level, I can also take certain labels and put that on my water bottle. That will also restructure the water. Now, that takes effort, and I'm all for effort, but when I have all these different things going on, I want to find things that will help re-optimize my environment effortlessly. That's what this thing is doing. So it's literally creating those intentionalities that I would either have to do on purpose or put on the bottle over and over again in a very consistent way. That's literally what this thing is built for, coupled with color therapy and so on and so forth. So on one hand, you have the things that you should always do: drinking clean water, eating clean food, breathing more, meditating more, not looking at your phone first thing in the morning and and last thing at night, and just being a little bit more of a human whenever you can while still living in this world. And the second approach would be using technologies as stepping stones along the way. Technologies can also be a vitamin D supplement. If you're living in a place that is being sprayed in your skies and your sun is not as strong because of the chemicals in the air, vitamin D will probably help you. Now, I don't like outsourcing my power to things outside of me. I believe that we have everything that we need within ourselves to heal ourselves. But I also acknowledge that we live in a world that has completely been intoxicated across all fronts. So I see technologies like the light system pyramid and these technologies in the centers all around the world, not as a destiny, but as a stepping stone to get us to the point where once we fix our world and fix all the imbalances, we'll never need something like this again because nature does what this does. We're just no longer in nature, for the most of us at least, right? Maybe when you're in Peru and you're in the Amazon and all that, you're much closer to it. But the average person is not in nature. The average person is in Wi-Fi all the time, is around dirty electricity, eating food that's fake, drinking water that's intoxicated. All these things that we need to be able to counterbalance. So that's really one of the reasons why I built Unified Healing. And that's why I tell everybody, you got to go and just experience one of these centers once and see where it takes you around the world. Because beyond just the health side of it, it's built to expand consciousness. And when we expand our own consciousness, your vessel becomes a vessel that can be a lot more coherent.
It's interesting because I spent a lot of time in the Amazon where there are these very strong plants. Then I moved up to the Andes where you don't find them as much, but I met an old, I think, wisdom keeper, and he was saying, very interesting, and I never thought about that, is they didn't need them as much in the Andes because all of these mountains, these sacred mountains, which they call apus, they're pyramidal structures, and just by being around them, you tap into the frequency of that, and they have a tremendous reverence for these mountains, and they commune with them and they heal by them. So it's very fascinating. You have a really interesting YouTube channel. You're doing some really good and I think interesting work there. Can you speak a bit about that as we begin to wrap up? I mean, like I said, you're the Pyramid Code, James O'Keefe. I mean, you're really getting into some interesting topics, which I think are very fringe for a lot of people. But for some people, it's like super up their alley. So I think you're doing really interesting work at bringing these topics together.
Yeah. So I cover everything that has a common theme of how can we make people more aware, more educated, more conscious. Now that could be exposing the medical system. That could be teaching people fundamental laws of how to apply to their life in order to live a more conscious life, a life where they are a conscious creator instead of just bound by this illusion of luck and chance, because I think that that's not real. There's no such thing as luck. If there's such thing as cause and effect, you can reverse engineer the effect to understand the cause, produce a cause in a conscious way to create your desired effect over and over again. There are formulas for that. So I teach that on my YouTube channel. It's anywhere from basic teachings to exposing to disclosing crazy things that nobody's ever heard of, and really anything in between. There's not one thing that I focus on, and that's the idea of, and I'm not calling myself a polymath because I don't know. I don't know. There's so much I don't know, so I don't know. But what I do know, I like teaching, and every day I learn more. So I like focusing on a lot of different topics and bridging the gap between them and really teaching people how to understand that everything is interconnected. So we deal with a lot of really cool and big personalities, people like Tony Robbins, Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., James O'Keefe, and many others, doctors, scientists, physicists, and just teachers in their own way. People like Robert Edward Grant. He's a mathematician. He's incredible in what he does. I do a lot of podcasts. I was just on his podcast yesterday. So he's an incredible, incredible guy. We have a really cool interview on my YouTube channel as well called The Codes of Creation. That blew my mind when we did it. It was amazing. And that's what YouTube is all about. Unified TV, which is our video streaming platform, kind of expands a little deeper into that. So we have a lot of cool content there that can't be found anywhere else, like James O'Keefe episodes that are behind the scenes of what he's doing with the CIA and Disney and Big Pharma and all these really cool stuff. So it's fun, man. It's a fun, I was going to say job, but it's not a job. It's a purpose. It's a mission.
Well, I think you are a polymath in the best way of that. And, I think we live in such an interesting time, and a lot of these indigenous prophecies speak that we are in the time of building bridges. And there's a beauty to specialization, but much like you were talking about with medicine, like what we've, I think, really lost is the general practitioner, the one who may not be like so specialized in one specific thing, but who can look at the bigger picture. And often when we forget how to do that, we're not able to put the pieces together because we're only seeing things through one lens. And when we pull back, and then we can recognize patterns, and even talking about like vibration or frequencies, it's really pattern recognition and realizing that, understanding that. I think very beautifully, as you said, like being able to reverse engineer something, like that's true science, that's true, I think, ingenuity, and being able to put pieces together to ultimately create a better earth. So I commend you for doing that, and thank you for your work. Thank you for coming on. If people are interested in contacting you, learning more about you, is the YouTube channel best? A website? What's the best way to do that?
So a few things. Definitely YouTube, Jason Shurka. We're also doing a really cool giveaway where we're giving away one of these for anybody that follows our account on Instagram called the Light.System. So for anybody that's watching, make sure to check that out because this is something really cool that we could ship over to you. So that's the Light.System on Instagram. There's my website. I don't use my website that often because I'm on everything else, but that's jasonshurka.com. And of course, if you want to find a Unified Healing Center and experience it, you can go to unifiedhealing.com, spelled right like that, UNIFYD healing.com.
All right, everyone, that's it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I think he's a really interesting guy doing really interesting work, a whole lot of topics. I think we could speak a lot more. Hopefully we'll do round 2 in the future. I think that's it. As always, if you'd like to work with myself, with my colleague Marav Artsy, we have an upcoming plant medicine dieta in Ireland starting July 1st. At the time of recording this, we still have a few spots open. It's a really beautiful opportunity to be in the land of Ireland, to connect with the indigenous trees there, the indigenous wisdom, and via the modality that we work with. So if you'd like more information about that, you can check out my website at nicotianarustica.org. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And as always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help. Patreon is a really amazing site. It's a website. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's a few different tiers you can sign up for. Those different tiers also give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. As always, thank you very much to everyone supporting that way. And if you're able to, that really helps me to continue to do this podcast. If not, as always, helping with the algorithms is always a really big help too. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the videos, and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, just leaving a starred rating and also a short review is a really big help. So that's it. I'm shooting this just before we go to our retreat in Portugal, so I'll probably be taking a break from shooting for a while. We have a number of guests already coming out, and the following guest, I'm still not sure of the order, but as always, I hope to bring on some really fascinating people. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope this finds you all well, and I will see you all on the next episode.